What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WWE Network and show where I, Graham G.S. and Matthews, break down all the original content I watch on the WWE Network, on Peacock, and on Vice TV. As today we're talking Season 1, Episode 7 of Tales from the Territories on Portland, where wrestling got weird, was the name of this episode. So this is all about Pacific Northwest wrestling. It had roots dating back to the 1920s, we were told, one of the first promotions to broadcast a weekly TV show called Pacific Pro or Pacific Wrestling. I forgot exactly what it was called. We hear from Mike Masters, the Grappler, a.k.a. Len Denton, Princess Victoria, and Bushwhacker Luke. So Victoria talks about breaking into the business young through Pacific. Masters, it was as simple for him, it was as simple as presenting an 8x10 to someone. He was called into the territory soon after. Denton talks about how Portland wrestling really took place at a bowling alley, and he loved it. He was like, what did I get myself into when he first arrived at the arena? But he absolutely loved it. He recalls an angle that he did with Billy Jack Haynes, where he called his dad, or he made fun of the fact that Haynes' dad was blind. They brawled into the crowd. People got into it. It was super, not get into it, oh, they were super hot for it. They were, but they also were super aggressive, got physical with the wrestlers and whatnot. It was pretty crazy. Luke talks about how Don Owen ran the promotion. He always made the arena look full. His brother, Don's brother Elton, was also a promoter, an ex-boxer as well. They tell this story of Adrian Adonis putting Don's cigar up his ass, which is fucking disgusting. Up Adrian's own ass, to be specific here. And then Don wouldn't know about it, and then Don would put it back in his mouth and ask why it tasted like shit, and would put it back in his mouth right after that. So that's fucking disgusting. He was also an idiot, was Don, I guess, or maybe it was Elton, I don't remember, because he accidentally shot himself in the testicles while he was drunk one time. And the cops asked him, why did you try to kill yourself? He said, I'm not dumb enough to try to kill myself by shooting myself in the balls. So I thought that was a pretty dumb but funny story. Masters recalls Buddy Rose turning down an autograph from a kid while out in public one time, because he always tried to keep kayfabe. And the kid at that point then, accused him of hitting on his girlfriend. And then Buddy was so pissed by that, he actually struck the kid. So Masters was like, we should probably get out of here before we get arrested, before the cops come to get you. So he was also a bit of a baby, too, they say. He didn't want to get hurt, did Buddy Rose, and he would also speed a lot. He had a lead foot, so to speak. He would lie to the cops and tell them, hey, I got to get to the hospital. I just had a barbed wire match. The cops would believe it, escort him to the hospital, and then he would leave as soon as the cops left. So typical pro wrestler life there, I guess. Buddy Rose and Matt Bourne, who later went on to become Doink the Clown, the best, and really not the only Doink the Clown, but the best there ever was in that role, had an iconic rivalry in Pacific Pro. Buddy Rose actually in real life, not as part of a storyline, they incorporated it into their on-air feud. He actually married Bourne's sister in reality. So they tell the story about how Bourne was pissed by this when he heard about it. And again, this is a complete shoot. He went to Rose's house and beat him up. The cops got called on Bourne. He got arrested, made bail. 2 days later, they get into it again in the locker room at the place, at the wrestling company. And Buddy was the type of guy that was a massive instigator. He would talk shit and then run away. That was just the type of person he was. Masters tells the story that Rose actually paid him, offered him $50 to go back to his house with him. Masters first said no before he was offered the $50, went back to the house with him, and then he said, listen, look around my house to make sure that, Matt's not there. And I said Bourne wanted to go back. I think it was Rose. Rose wanted Masters to go back to his house with him to make sure that Bourne wasn't there. And he wasn't. And I thought it was going to turn into a case where, he would look inside, he wasn't there, and then Rose would go into his house, and then he was, and he would get the shit kicked out of him. That actually was not the case. But they tell this story to kind of illustrate the fact that this was not a work. Masters thought it was a work at first, because everything back then was usually a work. This was not a work. He came to that conclusion. And to the point where not only did he have him check out the house, they went to great lengths, you would think, to kind of keep this to make it seem like it was a reality, like a real thing. And it was a real thing. But Buddy had a gun with him as well. He pulled out a .357 or whatever Masters called it. I'm not a gun guy, so I don't know what that is. But they showed the visual of it. I'm like, holy shit. He went that far to pull out a gun, not on anyone, but leave it on the car seat if it came to that. So it was very much real. They came to that conclusion, like I said a moment ago. So anyway, Victoria tells the story about taking part in a battle royal. And I think it was her debut match. It was in Salem. Salem, probably, near in Portland. I don't know. So I hear Salem and I think Massachusetts. This obviously was not Massachusetts. But she was thrown out of the Battle Royal by some guy named Rip, and I think Rip Fowler from NXT. Obviously not fucking Rip Fowler, but some guy named Rip and maybe Rip Rogers, I don't know, and Buddy Rose. So they throw her out of the Battle Royal. She hits the brick wall, and she starts bleeding. Her family was there because this was like her big, breakout performance, her first match, whatever. It was an intergender spot, which they didn't do a whole lot of back then. She starts bleeding. The family was not clued in by Victoria that this was not real. So her younger brother, by about 5 years, gets in Buddy's face and had to be escorted out of the arena by security. So she tells the workers, like she tells the wrestlers, no, I did not smarten up my family. They were wondering, why did he rush the ring? And she was like, well, they don't know that it's not real. And in doing so, she earned the boys' respect by doing that, which I thought was pretty cool. She actually ended up going to WWF later on, working with Moolah and people like that. The Bushwhackers, or rather, Luke tells the story here about how the Bushwhackers faced Piper and Rick Martel in a cage match one time. They thought it was a good idea, did Piper and Rick, to go over the cage to enter the match. To enter the cage, they went over the cage to get into the match. And by doing so, Piper's kilt got caught on the cage and he fell down to the mat right on his ass. The Bushwhackers were laughing their ass off. They thought it was funny. He also tells the story that Piper and Butch, Luke I assume was there too because he tells the story, got pulled over for weed one time by the cops. They paid the fine. They got brought to the courthouse. I don't know if they had to apologize or whatever. But before they left, they actually pissed on the courthouse window. Like they paid the judge the fine and then for good measure pissed on the window, which was just, I guess, classic Piper behavior, I guess. So they praised Piper as one of the greatest of all time. He was obviously the biggest star to come out of that promotion. It's such a shame that Piper's not here to retell his own stories here on the show, having lost him back in 2015, unfortunately. Masters tells the story about not being able to break the full Nelson, which I honestly, this is going to sound stupid. I had no idea, if this is true, that this is where the Master Lock came from. Mike Masters doing the full Nelson, whatever. If that was his finisher and like the gimmick was that he couldn't break it due to his fingers swelling up, I assume that's where the Chris Masters character was inspired from in WWE many years later. So I might be wrong and that's a complete coincidence, but looking at the two, knowing that he did the full Nelson as a finisher and their last names were both Masters in the ring, I mean, that's too much of a coincidence. So I assume it was inspired by him. I just wasn't really aware of who Mike Masters was before this episode. So anyway, they had this grand idea of having Masters lock in the full Nelson on Matt Bourne, and he couldn't break it. The fans rushed the ring and they went wild. The whole reason for this story was that Elton wasn't there. He wasn't a fan of the angle. He knew it would get heat, but he wasn't there that week, so they went with the angle. A fan ended up hooking Stan Stasiak's ankle, and when he turned around to find the fan, he ran away. That seems to be a common theme throughout these stories and all of these episodes, where a fan like either shoots someone or throws a fucking brick or does something dumb. Before they can be held accountable, though, they get away. So all these fans that are all like doing this dumb shit are all out there somewhere now, I guess. So anyway, the rodeo riders in the area in Eugene, which is where this took place, served as security for this whole thing. Elton was pissed when he found out about it because he wasn't there, and he also thought that they would be sued for doing this. Denton, a.k.a. the Grappler, who I mentioned earlier, became the booker of the promotion in 1987, and they tell the story of the commission coming in and kind of ruining things. They forced Don to adhere to certain rules, including how matches had to be stopped if there was blood. John Nord had the idea alongside, I think it was Grappler. They were in a match against Bryan Adams. He had the idea of beating Bryan Adams with a gallon of milk. Now that sounds dumb, and the Grappler wasn't sold on that. I don't know if it was Grappler. I think it was Masters. I don't remember who told the story. But it ended up, and then he asked the question, like, have you ever been hit with a gallon of milk? It doesn't feel too nice. So the milk ended up exploding all over the fans after they hit, Adams with the gallon of milk, and it went over well. But Don Owen was pissed because he had to pay to have the mat cleaned. Bourne was one of those people that would not listen to the commission. He actually got juice during a match, and he went backstage and told Denton, no, it was Hardway, and Denton was like, I'm not fucking dumb. I know you bladed yourself and you right down to the bone, whatever. Like, that's just gross. They got shut down for a week because of that, and they lost their TV slot that Vince desperately wanted. Vince was hot on their heels at that point. Vince McMahon, that is, of course. They tell the stories, each of them, about how each of them left. Masters gave his notice, went to WWF. Victoria was only told that she'd be booked if she went through Moolah. Piper kind of advised her against that, but she knew that she would only be booked if she went to Moolah, so that's exactly what she did. She went to WWF as well, as mentioned earlier. The Bushwhackers also went to WWF. They weren't happy about being less intense and less hardcore, but they became very cartoonish, but that's where they became celebrities and made a lot of money. So they also tell the story of the president of Channel 12, which is where the show aired, retiring. The new president went with WWF in that slot. Vince was paying $3,500 a week to get that slot. Don was paying nothing. So they lost that slot. That was it for them on that channel. And Don told Denton, I'm just too old to fight this battle. So that was pretty much it. They talk about how no tape library was saved by Don. He would always film over the shit from last week, I guess. So no formal tape library, existed. But at the same time, Buddy Rogers, I guess, Victoria says, taped every match while he was there. And I don't think it's in the possession of WWE now. It must either be owned by, Buddy Rose isn't around anymore, his estate or Don's estate or someone like that. So it's not on Peacock or the WWE Network or whatever, as far as I know, Portland Wrestling. I might be wrong, but they don't really clear that up. But, I mean, the footage is out there somewhere because Rose taped it all, which is pretty cool. And when they close out the episode here, they dedicate the show, and they talk about the show, the Pacific Pros, Legacy, and whatever. They dedicate the episode to Mike Masters. And I remember hearing the interview that the producers of the show, who also did Dark Side of the Ring, obviously, did with Jericho to promote the show a few months ago, or not even like a month or two ago. And they mentioned that someone who they recorded with for one of these episodes had passed away. I didn't know it was Mike Masters. Mike Masters looked fucking fantastic. He did not look that very old at all. He was probably in his 50s, maybe 60s. I mean, this promotion was from the 80s, so he was probably pretty young at that time. And he looked massive, and he looked older then, too. But anyway, I guess he passed away in August due to throat cancer, so I thought that was really unfortunate. And, R.I.P. to Mike Masters. But overall, a very good episode here. Again, personally, know nothing about Pacific Pro. I know Piper kind of got his start there and was big there, but as far as the stories they shared, I was aware of none of these, so I thoroughly enjoyed the episode. And, these episodes are never must-see. A lot of them I kind of hear after the fact, after I record these reviews, that was wrong, this was wrong, not from you guys in the comments, but just elsewhere, like, oh, these stories were wrong, and this was not historically accurate. That seems like it's a recurring theme throughout these episodes. As far as the actual telling of the stories, whether they actually happen or not, is very fucking entertaining. So I enjoy the show. I don't know if it's going to be picked up for a second season. I don't think the ratings are that strong at all, especially compared to Dark Side of the Ring, and even those ratings weren't through the roof. I'm enjoying it while it lasts. I thought there were 8 episodes. I guess there's actually 10. So we have an episode this coming week for the holiday week, and then another 2 more in December after that, which is pretty sweet. One in late November, and then another one in December, and that's it. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm glad there's 3 more episodes left to review, and I'll break them down here on the channel when I get a chance. So be sure to like this video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more daily content. Hit the bell button as well to be notified for every time a new video goes up here on the channel, and check out the playlist down below for all my reviews of Tales from the Territories. Have an awesome one, guys. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. I'm Graham Jason Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.